Well, hello.
Oh, hi, friends. Hi, lovely wife.
Are you talking to are you implying I have multiple personalities or what?
Well, are you implying that you don't?
I mean, this wasn't a question for me. It was a question for you.
And I redirected.
You did. Welcome to the Life Unfiltered show. I am Ashley DeWeese, and this is my wonderful spirited beau, Justin DeWeese.
The love of her life,
Yes. And
the
if I look
twinkle in her
like
eyes.
can't move my mouth or I'm like robotic, it's because I have a really bad canker sore. I think it's from where I think I bit my lip the other day and now it's canker sore. And so now it hurts every time I move my mouth.
Never fun.
But it's still showing up, doing
You
the
are.
thing.
Proud of you.
It's
You're a
called,
warrior queen.
I am. It's called keeping promises to yourself. It's called follow through. It's called consistency, all of which did not used to be my bag.
Well, yes, I agree with you. And I want to applaud you for coming a long way because you have really developed those skills and traits. I
Thanks.
would argue that outside of the weirdos that are born robots, they're not really anybody's like defaults, right?
Sure. We
Like we have to
definitely,
cultivate those
I don't
skills.
think we're born with those traits. I also have one on my tongue, by the way. It hurts really bad.
She's a hot mess.
I got one over here,
Lifers.
one over here. It's like coming at me from all angles.
And it's ruining my life
Why?
because I like engaging with that mouth non-verbally. And now I can't.
And no, you can't. You know what else?
No
This
fly
is
zone.
random. If I, no one pays this close of attention. It's just annoying to me. This stool that I'm sitting on, which we got secondhand, which you're like, well, okay, obviously you're having trouble with it. It doesn't hold its position. So since we started this, it's slowly just like air going out of a tire. So and I can feel it. It's so annoying because I
Yep.
can just feel myself sinking lower and lower and lower.
That is the worst sensation. But that's also a sensation you should be familiar with since you're seemingly getting shorter day by day.
I mean, it's annoying that you say that, but it is true. Is this just like a phenomenon? Is it phenomena? Phenomenon.
Something like a phenomenon. Something like a phenomenon. Such a great hit by LL Cool J. Come on.
Okay, but you didn't answer my question. Which
I
form
don't
of it
know.
is?
I don't know the proper
All I
grammatical
mean is this
usage.
just like a thing that happens to women as they get older? We just get shorter because I am shrinking. I feel like I need to go to, do chiropractors stretch you out? Like,
I mean, they can,
I mean, pull you out like,
or you can get one of those inversion tables where you hang upside down like a vampire.
yeah, I don't want one of those, but I feel like I
I
just
don't,
need someone to pull on both ends of me. And, like in the medieval times, look at that. Look at
man,
that.
guns are smoking. Although I will say,
It's okay to
you
celebrate
know,
yourself, people.
I could see some, let's call them non-traditional uses that an inversion table might provide.
Okay, let's
I'm just
that is
saying,
the kids are home for summer, and so you know,
yeah, that's
maybe
why I talk in code.
maybe that's for an episode when we send them out of the house for a day.
Non-traditional.
Non-traditional, very professional
Right.
there.
I know how to
Yeah,
clean it up.
apparently.
Come
Apparently.
on.
I've been thinking a lot lately about uh the expectations that we hold for anything and everything, as I am actually getting ready to onboard uh, a grouping of new women who have come into my Embrace Your Crown women's wellness community. And as I'm thinking about that process of bringing them aboard and helping them get started successfully to work toward their goals, some of them have fitness goals, some of them have, just personal growth goals, et cetera, et cetera. I've been thinking about the idea of the expectations that we hold and the impact that the expectations we hold have on the way we conduct ourselves, the way we
You know,
interact with others, and really kind of impacts like our emotions, and then that impacts our actions, etc. And so I wondered if you wanted to chat a little bit with me today about the idea of the expectations we hold and the impact that those expectations can have.
yeah, that sounds amazing. I mean, my expectation was we were going to show up on this podcast and have a bang bang conversation and deliver value to the people. And I mean, the stars have aligned.
Well, and if I'm being unfiltered
Whoa.
completely
I mean, this is life unfiltered.
and totally truthful, which what I
So,
just said was actually truthful. It has been on my thoughts a lot. But right as we were getting ready to start this podcast, I asked you, hey, did you have any thoughts on the brain? And this is just me, as we've noted before, making sure that we have things to talk about. And we always figure out things to talk about, but sometimes I'm just like, hey, like you got some stuff rolling around up there that, would make for good conversation. That's all I want to know before we hit play.
right.
And you said,
I said, no, I'm drawing a blank. I've been rolling around in my brain all day because I knew we were going to record this morning. So I was like, at the gym and eating breakfast and like, what would be a good thing to talk about? And like, nothing was appealing. So I had nothing when the question was asked.
and so here, lifers, this is how I'm going to share my own example so that you can see maybe where you're doing this in your life and how it's not super productive or useful. So when you said that, I immediately got annoyed. Could you tell?
Oh, yeah. I saw it in your face. I was like, well, there we go.
I got annoyed because in that moment, I felt like, why does it feel like I'm often like, you never have any? This is what my brain said. My brain said, you never have a suggestion for what we should talk about. Why am I always seeming the one to come up with the things to talk about for this? And I started to get annoyed. And then things started to go into my brain that were completely unrelated to this conversation that were like, you never this, you never that. And I could feel it impacting me. And then my brain said, well, you better stop this runaway train because you're going to just tank this whole podcast recording
Right.
vibe if you continue doing that. But I thought it'd be good to talk about because this is a personal I don't know if I'm trying to eliminate the word struggle from my vocabulary.
Challenge.
Yeah, it's an area that challenges me, an area
There you
that
go.
I'm very aware of that I would like to improve upon because I know the impact that it has. But anywho, do you ever do that? Like
Which part
immediately.
specifically?
Well, do you ever do that? I'm just gonna try to piece this out a little bit. Like, do you
Okay.
ever do that? Like what I just did is you because essentially when you're like, what does that have to do with expectations? Clearly, I have an internal expectation of you that
Right.
you are to be an equal contributor in this case to our adventure of podcast recording.
Right.
And in that moment, my brain told me he's not contributing. And it
Right.
annoyed me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, of course, I've experienced that. Right. I think that this is probably one of the greatest sources of strife in ours and everyone else's relationship. Right. Because you have clearly stated to me the expectation of, hey, we're doing this podcast together,
Mm-hmm.
which I get. We're doing it together. Beyond that, like, what does that truly mean to you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because my interpretation of what that means could be different than what your interpretation is. And if your interpretation is this dude should show up every week with 5 to 10 fresh ideas that we can banter about and then pick one, then I can meet those expectations, right?
Yeah.
But if expectations are not clearly stated, and I'm guilty of this as well, right? Of not clearly stating expectations to you, then we get all up in our feelings of like, oh man, she never does this and that and the other thing.
Right. Well, and
And
that, oh, sorry.
well, and I truthfully, honestly, do I never
Right. That's one of
contribute,
the things I was gonna go to. Yeah.
right? Because that's we get trapped in that feeling, right? Of our expectation is not met. And so then our brain goes, oh, well, she never does this,
Right.
right?
Or
And
always.
if you let it run away,
Right.
like you'll keep going down that path. But if you can stop yourself and be like, is that true?
Yeah.
Does she really never massage my feet?
Which is
No,
really
she's massaged my feet. So
which is
let's,
really hard, which is really hard in the moment to do this.
of
And that's
course,
why, if obviously if you're listening to this, this is a this is the trippy part of being on a personal growth journey and becoming more self-aware, is because you will do things and catch yourself doing things that you recognize are unhealthy patterns or non-useful actions, thoughts, etc. But yet they're still happening. And so definitely talking about it on the podcast is challenging, because everything that I'm saying that is the like not so great behavior or whatever, like I already know it's not helpful, and I already know why. So but I want to make sure we kind of like talk about like both sides of it. So
sure,
so with this, like, yeah, we can just, first of all, expectations. We all have them, and we all have them
right,
of other people. And expectations are not bad. Like, I'm all about like you should have expectations. You should have high expectations, um,
yes,
and high standards. Absolutely. Where we struggle in regard to expectations when it comes to our relationships, for example, is when, as my bearded bow pointed out, we are not clearly communicating those expectations to the other party or parties involved.
right,
And specifically in marriages, this is just, I think this is, there's several, I'm sure, like key tips we could give to people on bettering their marriage. This would be one of them, because it happens over and over and over again for me, where I realize that like this is an expectation that I have of him, but it's not necessarily his expectation of himself, nor does he even understand that it's an expectation that I have of him.
right,
And so it's setting the other person up for inevitable failure when we don't communicate those expectations, because they don't know. And
right,
for anyone, because women do this a lot, who are like, well, they should know. They don't know unless
right,
you tell them. And if they do, that's great. Maybe they have this internal gift and gut instinct and whatever. But like a large percentage of the time, your significant other, male or female, whichever way we're talking about this, they do not know your expectations of them in any number of situations until you actually communicate them. And that doesn't mean that, oh, I've already communicated them and they're not. I'm talking about, have you ever clearly
right.
communicated, this is my expectation with this situation? With, I started to say scenario. We should like,
Wow.
seriously, can we just start taking note of all of my like vocabulary
Make it
words?
like an Ashley lexicon.
Last week it was shat. This week it's scenario. I kind of like it.
Good
But yeah, if it's not
heavens.
clearly communicated, I'm setting you up for failure. You can't meet my expectation if you don't know what it is.
Well, and you're not just setting me up for failure, right? You're setting yourself up for failure,
Yes. Yeah,
right? Like,
because
right. So, like when we first got together, me and old Sugar Plum over there, she made it clear to me that her expectation was you need to kiss me and tell me good night every night. Like, I expect to be told goodnight and kissed goodnight. Obviously, if you're traveling, you can't kiss me, but you can tell me goodnight every
Did I
single night.
actually say that to you?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just making this up on the fly.
I just don't remember it. That's why I'm like, oh, this is a new one.
Nope. Nope. This is legit in real life, hon.
I learned so much about myself from you. Thanks for retelling
Yeah,
these
clearly.
stories.
Anyway, so she clearly stated that an expectation, right? And so I complied, which, like that one's a no-brainer. But my point there is, had she not stated that, but still held that expectation of
Mhm.
me, like we wouldn't have made it to marriage because she'd have been
Yeah.
like, he doesn't really love me. He only tells me goodnight or kisses me goodnight every so often.
Well,
And
and
I
that's
and I'd
what
be and she'd dump me and I'd be like,
what's going
the
on.
hell just happened?
Well, and that's the secondary thing, right? Is then the meaning that we attach to the unmet
Right.
expectation.
Right.
Is that, in this scenario today that I am using, and seriously, all these thoughts went off in my brain. Our brain is such a powerful thing, by the way. Like it's such a powerful thing. It's like what I envision is going on inside of my brain is like an army of little people, like just ticking away, running all over the place, typing on typewriters. Like that's the Ashley description.
Well, it's like
Uh,
that Pixar movie, whatever it's
right.
called.
What is that called? Inside Out.
Yeah, Inside Out.
Yeah, but like multiply that by like a
Well, of
million
course.
bazillion things. But anyways, in that quick moment, in my brain, I had these thoughts go through my brain as well of see, he doesn't take this as seriously as me. He puts it all on me. Here's another thing that's fully my responsibility to like lead the charge with. And that's the meaning that I attach to it.
Right.
And as you thanks, Sim.
Thumbs up. Zoom.
As you pointed out, you said that you had been pondering the fact that we were going to record the podcast today.
Right. All
And
day.
yeah. And see, again, there's so many things here. Like, because you showed up to it and things went down as it did, like, I made the assumption, like, I had no idea. I had no idea that you'd been pondering those things. I had no
Right.
idea that you had even thought a thing about it, that you just knew we were doing this. And so you showed up and here we are. Like, that's the
Right.
picture I painted in my mind of your approach and how you see this. And so again, taking my expectation that I have not clearly communicated to you, then taking how that makes me feel, right? Which I
Right.
was annoyed. And then as I started to have these other thoughts come in about other stuff, I started to get angry inside, right? And then there was also this like, I'm just going to shut down for a moment because I don't know if any of you females out there can relate to that, but sometimes you just like shut down. You're like, I'm so angry inside, like I'm just not going to do anything, say anything. But then obviously, if I am in a state of anger, frustration, annoyance, like that changes my demeanor. That changes how we are going to interact with each other.
Correct.
Like you're not going to get Nashville episode Ashley if I am
Nope.
in a state like I was quickly going to, because of again this unmet expectation, these thoughts and feelings that then came in as a result of that. And then had I allowed that to play out without taking a pause and to be like, okay, wait a minute, like we're not going to go here, we probably would not have recorded this if I would have kept going.
Oh, 100%. And so
Right.
let me just stop you for a second
Mhm.
and say, I'm proud of you and I'm proud of your growth
Thanks.
because probably as short as 3 years ago, maybe even sooner than that, it all would have transpired like that. And we would not be recording this podcast right now.
It's hard. Like
Of
you
course
see
it
I'm
is.
teary-eyed from it. Like this that you're seeing right here, and that's one of the reasons why, and I told myself recently, like, I want to have some more episodes like this, is because like this is real. Like we talk about, like, we don't have everything figured out. And yes, we have a great marriage, and yes, we have like a love for each other that knows no bounds and depths, I don't believe. Uh but like it's challenging. Like we still face challenges, right? There's
Of
just shit that we
course.
have to figure out. And like this is an example of one of those things that I know many couples deal with. And
Right. Oh
some
yeah.
and many don't. This that we've become aware of that we're sharing today, there's so many couples, they don't have that awareness, they don't know these things. And so my hope is that by being a little bit more vulnerable sometimes with some more serious topics, um it can be helpful and valuable to other people's relationships and marriages, to be like, oh shit, you know. And I hope that you're picking up on, as we, I feel like we reiterate this message through everything we say, that a lot of this has to do with me and him, like the individual, right?
Right.
There's a problem, if you will, in the relationship in this situation, but it's as a result of something that's going on within the individual that then is spilling over into the interactions between the couple, that then causes these potentially negative results. And so it's that, again, it all comes back to me, is what I'm saying. It all comes back to the individual, is what I'm saying.
Like ripples in a pond.
Sure.
Like it's the little pebble thrown in your pond and the waves just.
Right.
But and that's what you said at the end there is perhaps the most important way to look at this, right? It's about me, right? Because if you took it from the standpoint of, well, this clown over here, he doesn't work to determine my expectations or meet my expectations or whatever, like you're going to keep getting more of the same,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Whereas if you take the realization of like, hey, maybe I haven't clearly communicated my expectations in this area, and we need to have a conversation to make sure that both sides understand that. Like that's what you can control, you know?
Yeah. And that's important. The whole, what do I have control over? Because I don't have control over any other human being. Nobody does.
Right.
Although we try and we
It
often
don't
convince
work.
ourselves that we do, we don't have control over any other human being. So if you make the decision that it's all the other person's fault and that you're just going to sit and wait until they do the right thing, whatever
It's gonna be
you
a
determine is the
long
right thing.
wait.
Well, and it's like victim mentality,
Right.
right? I'm the victim here. He's not doing this. He's not, he should this, he should that, right? And so it's victim mentality of, I'm going to wait for you to do what you need to do to fix this. And it's victim mentality. It also, like you said, like you are going to be waiting for a really long time. And then like what happens, right? If I'm waiting for you to fix things that we've already identified here, you don't even know need fixing.
Right.
Now I am prolonging this tension, this frustration and strife in our relationship and inside of myself.
Right. Well, and again, I could try fixing it, right? But if that has not been clearly made to me what needs to be fixed,
Then you're
I may
throwing
go,
darts like,
right. I may head to the east and you're sitting over there going, why the hell isn't he going west? That's what
right.
he needs to be doing.
Well,
And then you get
it's
even more tense and angry.
right
And
because it
yeah, I
leads.
mean, it's just,
And
oof.
we live in a world where it's a very like, we live in a very like blaming, like point fingers
Oh, yeah.
society, right? We do a lot of pointing fingers and not a lot of like pointing thumbs, fingers, thumbs. Um, that it's that ownership thing. I don't like take ownership because it feels better if I can
Right.
place responsibility on you instead of turning responsibility on myself. And so we live in this, let's blame everybody but myself for whatever problems I'm encountering. And I don't even know what I was going to say with that. Just the sorry, I got so caught up in the fingers and the
You're just so proud of yourself. Like, man, what a good, I killed that part.
right.
And the
So
rest just
proud
went,
of this girl.
right. Well
Um,
done.
no, we like to blame other people, but when you spend your life putting the blame on others, what does that do for you?
Well, it makes you feel better in the moment, right? Because, like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. That person screwed all this up, right? But then you lose control over everything. Like you're no longer in control of your life.
Right, because
And
you've
like
put in the power and keys in the hands of somebody else.
right. And and for most people in a lot of different hands.
Well, and those things follow you, right? So what
Right.
what sometimes people don't get is that you blame the other person in the relationship, right? And then the relationship dissolves and you get into another relationship. And guess what's still there? The same
Right.
kind of issue. Same
Right.
thing with sometimes like in a job, for example, there's an issue. Move on to this job or that job. And some of these same things pop up. And sometimes it doesn't even pop up in the same scenarios, right? It's just that personal responsibility that you're not taking. It pops up here and your relationship dissolves and you don't realize that at the root of that was your lack of personal responsibility in that relationship. And then somewhere else in your life, some sort
Right.
of problem or situation arises. And guess what's at the root of that? Your lack of personal responsibility. And so as we, it's like a distractor, right? Blaming is a distractor because as long as I'm blaming other people or a situation or an environment, it distracts me from having to actually look at the root, which often, not often, always, I am somehow contributing to. And I want to be
Right.
clear, like this is not what we're talking about here. This is not everything is always 100% your fault. No one else is ever playing a role. Nothing else is ever, a contributing factor. Like that's not it at all.
Mm-mm.
Because of course other people play into things. Of course
Right.
environment
Right.
plays into things, happenings that are completely out of your control truly play into things. But there is so much that you do have ownership of and responsibility for. And so it's one thing it's one thing for you to take as much ownership as possible in a marriage, for example, and like literally like, hey, I've owned everything I possibly can that's of my own doing and work to try to fix that, et cetera, et cetera. And this still isn't working, or this is still a recurring problem. That's one thing. But the
Right.
truth of the matter is, most people aren't going to the max with everything they can do introspectively themselves, and they're blaming the dissolvement or you know explosion of things in their life on everybody else instead of realizing, well, there were some things that you could have probably done to try to improve that and you didn't.
Right. Well, I mean, it's so painful to our little egos to look at ourselves and say, "Hey, this is wrong. I'm doing this wrong. I need to change this about myself." Like that's uncomfortable and not fun at all. It's way more fun to be like, "Man, Ashley needs to
Mm-hmm.
change that mouth of hers because it's not doing us any good. I play no role in that. It's just her." Like that
Mm-hmm.
feels way better than me going, "Well, what do I do? How do I contribute to that situation? What can I change?"
Yeah, and yeah, gosh, there's a multitude of things there. One, it's hard to take a look at yourself.
Of course.
and see the areas where you're falling short or you need to improve. Like it's hard to just recognize that, period, because nobody wakes up going like, man, I'm so thankful that I have flaws. I'm so thankful that there's like character traits I have that are not the best. Like nobody likes to recognize that. It's
No.
not fun. It's not fun. So that's number one. Number two, even if you're willing to confront those things about yourself, the second hurdle is, now that you have made yourself aware or accepted awareness of it, now there's work to be done. And, we got a society full of people that are often just trying to avoid the work of any
Yep.
kind.
Yep.
So, hey, man, like I can, not be aware at all. Or even if I become aware, then that means I got to put work in to like, no, thank you. I'll just again come back here in this seat of, let me judge you. You do the changing. You do the work, because I don't want to.
Right.
But it's a very disempowering way to go about life, to go about your relationships, to go about your interactions.
Right. And because again, in all the situations that you find yourself in all the relationships that you find yourself in all the shit scenarios that you find yourself in, you're the common denominator,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you're not looking at that piece and you're not working to get that piece to be as productive as possible, like what could be the possible outcome? I
Well,
mean,
and everyone listening, like if something continues to reoccur in your life, right? Why does it keep happening? As he just said, like, why do you always find yourself in these kind of relationships? Why do you always find yourself in these predicaments? Like, what, as you said, what is the common denominator? So ask yourself, is there something that keeps popping up in my life over and over again that I've been blaming on X, Y, Z, or all of them, that I actually maybe need to take a look at my role in those things and
right,
what's my responsibility? Have you ever done that?
right,
And again, like we've said, like this is still things that we work on, even though we are aware, but pausing to be like, what's my role in this? That's why, like, as a divorce, is that how you say it? A divorcee?
I don't
Someone
know.
who's been married before and
Used
divorced,
goods.
both of us. Oh my gosh. That's something post that event. I'm able to look back on, so many people like have such high emotional connection still to former mates, for
Right,
example, as they continue throughout their life. Like they just can't let go of that emotion. And for me, honestly, like, and obviously it's been like years, but with everything that we have grown and learned over the time, like I can look back on all of my relationships and see places where I contributed to the problems that arose in those relationships that I didn't take ownership of at the
right.
time. And again, would the outcome have changed if I had? I don't know. Don't know if it would have, don't know if it wouldn't have. And that doesn't matter. But that's an example, though, where like, just this concept that we're discussing here of ownership and whatnot, it allows me to look back at those things, for example, from a better perspective and a better place, and not drag so much like unneeded negative
Right.
emotion with me throughout my entire life, that if you think isn't weighing you down, people, it
It
is.
is.
But I don't have negative thoughts and emotions when people talk to me about my past marriage and what went down and why it dissolved and whatever. Like I just don't, because I have perspective and growth. And so I don't know, people often fear taking ownership and responsibility because you feel like, man, that's a lot on my shoulders if I do that. But at the same time, it's incredibly empowering because one, it allows you to have hope that you can change things, right? Because if you're looking at something and you're like, man, there's nothing I can do about this.
Right. There ain't
So,
no hope there.
right. And then that's a really shitty place to be and a really shitty place to feel. But when you feel like you have hope that you can make something better, that you could potentially change something, that you could do something right now to better yourself, your situation, etc., like that's a good place to be. And
Right.
so responsibility, of course, it's weighty, but it's also very powerful because as I say to my clients, like it's you having the keys to your car in your life. Like you have the keys.
Yep. Unless you give them away.
Right. Right. So anywho, I was starting to say, I don't know how we got here. I know how we got here.
Oh,
But
I know how we got here.
I guess the big nug today is not only to manage your expectations of others, but to clearly communicate them. And honestly, we could do a whole multiple episode series on expectations. But just for one lesson today, if the expectations that you have that involve other people or will have an impact on other people, you are best to clearly communicate those expectations to the other party or parties, because you will find it will alleviate so much unneeded complication.
Right.
Uh, and it will just give you more clarity in situations and so forth, instead of just living in these made up stories that you have in your head based on partial information that, anytime you're making up stories and it's only with partial information, like that ain't leading to any sort of great ending. So communicating your standards, your expectations to others will bring more clarity to your relationships and give you more of the outcomes that you actually want instead of the ones that you don't.
Right. And remember, 50% of clearly communicating means making sure that it has been understood by the
Yeah.
other person, right? Because you could sit there and be thinking, well, I clearly communicated exactly what I want as far as bringing stuff to the table for this podcast. But if you ask and I repeat something back completely different,
And you're like, oh
like
no, that's
you're
not
in the
what.
same situation, right? Like, you feel better. Well, I clearly stated my expectations. Oops, kick the table there. But if this guy didn't perceive that the same way that you said it, you've accomplished
Well,
nothing.
and that's recognizing that we're two different people.
Right.
Like you and I are two different people. And
Quite.
we've been married for almost 14 years. And
Look at you.
of course, we know a lot of things about each other and we know a lot of ways each other's works and how our brain works or doesn't. But we are two different people. And the way we think is not the exact same.
Right.
And the way we interpret things, not the exact same. And this is true for all couples. So that's a very great point that you brought up so that we didn't leave it out. That, yeah, I can do a flyby and be like, oh, by the way, I want this to happen. And that could mean something totally different to you
Right.
than what it means to me. So asking clarifying questions, right? When I'm like, hey, this is what I want, when we're doing the podcast or whatever, I would really like da da da. And if you say, okay, that's cool.
Okay, got it.
I could say something back to you like, okay, what does that look like for you? Or what
Right.
does that mean to you? You also could say back and be like, what I hear you, okay, so what I hear you saying is this. And then that gives me the opportunity to be like, yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. Or to be like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. Here's what it
Right.
is. And to be honest, like so much of this takes you being willing to be a flippin' adult,
Right.
to have the maturity to pause emotions, to ask these kind of questions that sometimes can be done in the moment. Sometimes it might be you having maturity to recognize, I'm so pissed right now on the inside, even though it may not be warranted, I'm still pissed. Like it doesn't deny the feelings. And that's important too, right? Because a lot of
Right.
times, like, we're trying to, like, I think people get the message, not that we're trying to tell them this, but the world tries to tell us, like, oh, you shouldn't feel that. You shouldn't be mad at him because he didn't know. Well, I'm mad. It doesn't, that's the emotion that I chose to allow myself to experience. And it's okay to experience it. But it's then, how are you going to act based off that? And sometimes
Right.
it might mean that you have to take a pause and come back to a conversation later. And that's okay. So it's not that we're
Perfectly okay.
trying to say your feelings are wrong or eliminate those feelings, like feel the feelings. But what is the more adult, mature thing to do that's actually going to move the needle to the direction that you want to go? Because, again, I can only speak for myself, but guilty as charged. There's times that because I haven't acted in maturity, because I haven't acted as a flippant adult, I've tanked so much lifetime, right? Like a day or several hours or like whatever,
Right.
simply because I wasn't willing to take a pause and have a little bit of communication of asking questions and explaining, et cetera, et cetera. So again, lots to unpack here, but
Whole lot.
I feel like we've given hopefully something you picked up today can help you in your relationships. And obviously we're talking specifically about marriage today, but it goes for any sort of relationship
Any
that you
human
have.
interaction.
It
Right.
all works the same. It all works the same. So
Yeah. So we're just hoping and praying that our couples counseling session here helped you guys, gets a little impact for
free of
you.
charge. This is a
I
very
mean,
inexpensive
this is the
couples
cheapest
therapy that
therapy
we
on the
gave.
face of the planet.
Right. Right. So yeah, anyways, great episode to see. And here is the outcome, right? Like in real time,
We
we
worked
just
through
gave
some
you a
things
real time example of going from something that could have turned out disastrous
for the whole day.
for the whole day, but because we were willing, I was willing because it was my thing to initiate this, right? We have created a beautiful piece of artwork here and hopefully help some
Ugh,
people along the way.
chef's kiss.
All right. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Apply something. That's the
Right.
last thing I'll say today. Like, make sure you're not just like taking in the things that you're listening to
Oh,
on this
man.
podcast. Like, we love that
Put
you're
it in your
listening, that you're
life.
watching. Love that for you. But what is even better, and what our hope and mission is that you will actually begin to apply things that you find helpful that we share and up level your
Right.
life. Because if you're still living and breathing, there's still more out there for you. So make something in your life better because of something that you've taken in here from us. So appreciate you all, and we'll see you next week.
Little life hack for you. Don't go to therapy. Start a podcast. Start talking it out on Zoom in front of strangers, but you're not really in front of strangers. Don't get any real-time feedback. I mean, I would like some likes, comments, and shares. That would make me feel good about myself. But yeah, like free therapy. Easy peasy.